Okay, good morning. Hope everything's well for you. And today is cold, sunny, but it just predicted that we may have another snow this afternoon. Um, Not bigger one, but snow this afternoon. But right now it's sunshine. Okay, so before I start, let me first emphasize this again. So if you haven't signed up the Zai books, please subscribe to Zybooks. Okay. Um, the Zybooks.com is it's a very important. It's required. The it's a required textbook for the class, and also um, I'm gonna assign a whole bunch of exercises from the Zybook. So you have to use the Zybook to do your exercises. So please do so if you haven't done so. Please actually do it as soon as possible. Um, Also, if you check the announcement, I have actually created a couple of groups, and I actually organize each of you into one of the group, and I also created a couple of okay. I also create a couple of Google Meet link for each of the group. Okay, so I think starting from next week, I may actually ask you to maybe
Sorry, I'm late.
no problem.
Yeah, because when I enter the meeting, it doesn't show me who's there, so that's why I couldn't tell
Okay,
whether or not this is the right one or not.
that's not a problem. You don't miss much. We just started.
Okay.
Um, so we actually create a couple of groups, and also in the announcement, I gave you the link for each of the group to use. So next week, my plan is, for some of the class, I want each of the group, you know, to work independently. So that means at the beginning of the class, you check your name and which group you belongs to, and maybe log into the group link. Um, so then you can discuss your group member. Um, so maybe you can have some kind of a little social, and then you can discuss some of the class topics. So here's what my plan what my plan is. Okay, so in certain classes, I want you to actually start log into the group instead of the class, the, the the current link we're using. So I get I gonna I'm going to give you the assignments. Okay, so then hopefully I hope that you can read the assignments. It's typically reading assignments for the Zai book. So each of you are going to read the Zai book, and then have some kind of group meeting and discuss what kind of problem you actually you have, and what kind of issues you just experience. And then I want each group to give me some kind of questions, problems. So then we can discuss the problems you have. So instead of actually me to actually talk all the time, and I don't even know, if I don't get feedback, I don't even know which part is the easy part or which part is difficult part. So some of the part in the Zai book, it's pretty simple and straightforward. So then I don't want to spend much time on this part. But in some area, some of the topics, it's kind of tricky and you know difficult, and I may actually spend more time on that part. And even some of the problems, questions, we can actually spend more time to solve some of the problems. So that's why I want to form the group. So now, what I want you to do is just keep, you know, checking the Blackboard, and check your Blackboard on a regular basis. Now, in some class, you know, if I may ask you to, start the class by logging into your group link instead of the class link, the general class link. Then you need to actually log into the group link first. But just check the Blackboard, you know. Don't just actually log into the group link if I don't ask you to do so, So generally, we still gonna go back to the class link, but in certain classes, I want to actually before the class, I want you to, have some kind of group discussions, and then put together some of the questions, problems, and then you can bring these questions and the problem in the class, so we can have some kind of discussions. Okay, that's the plan. So I want you, the reason for this is that I want you to be engaged. Make sure you just actively involved in this class, and I want to know what your real problem is. Some of the problems are very simple. Some of the problems are really difficult, but I don't know whether which one is the difficult one. So, and also for the group, I want you to select one of the team leader. Okay, for before each of the group meeting. Okay, so the team leader, can be switched. So I mean, the first meeting maybe you're the team leader. The second meeting you can select another team leader. So I want each of you to take a turn as a team leader. So the team leader can, collect all the problems and bring this problem in the class. Okay, so that's the hope. Okay, just keep it on the Blackboard. And if I want you to have a group meeting, I will actually, you know, put in the assignments, and I give you a reading assignments, and then the group meeting, and then, bring your question to the classroom. Okay. Your participation is also very important. Okay. So now for today, we're gonna actually first talk about the first couple of sections in chapter 1. Okay, so I plan to have like 3 classes for the chapter 1. So each section probably, each class gonna cover a couple of sections. Some of the section I may not cover in the classroom. I just simply ask you to read the Zai book, do the exercises in these chapters, in these sections, and then let it go, because some of these are so very straightforward. So, and I just want to quickly, pass it. Okay, so can you see the presentation material?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
That's good. So so this is actually in the first slide. This picture is the Edgley Hall. It's a computer science building. Actually, the computer science and the math department, we both share the building. So if you haven't seen, if you haven't actually been to the classroom since you joined the Fitchburg State, because at this very unusual time, so you may actually only took the remote classes. So, but hopefully things gonna be better, and we're gonna be all back to the campus. One hope is the vaccine. So once we got a vaccine and everyone get the vaccine, maybe we can live a normal life. So we can all go back to the campus. So this is the Edgley Hall. It's a computer science building. Um, so first topic we're going to talk about is the Java, the basic for the Java. Just like any other languages. So if you have actually completed CS1, I believe that you already learned the Python language. So, okay, this is actually generally true for pretty much all the computer languages. All computer language has uh, have the three basic instruction types. That's basically for all compute language. One basic actually instruction type is the import part. You know, every computer program should have an import part, and also um, it has a process part that basically do the computing job for to solve your problem. Okay, and then the output. Okay, so in this particular example, for example, the import part could be if you want to actually calculate the addition of two numbers, x plus y, and the import part should import the value x and y, right? So you have to have an import, and then you can actually do the computing. And then once you compute the addition, then you can output the result. So that's a very simple, you know, 3 stages for every languages. Now the other actually concept that I want to mention is it's something called computational thinking. And in the past, when people talk about how can I solve any problems, not just a computer science problem, or probably a problem in your life, okay? So in your real life. So in the past, people always use some kind of concept called mathematical thinking. Okay, mathematical is basically about the logic. So if you have a problem, and then people just say, okay, use your logic, and use actually try to actually provide some kind of reasoning, and then solve the problem. Okay, that's the mathematical thinking. you know it's actually very, very important, you know uh, throughout the industrial age, to enable people to successfully live and work. So most, even in the past, people even think that maybe we can use the math to solve every problem we have. And then eventually they prove, it's proved that this is wrong. So there are some of the problems you cannot solve using math. But mathematical thinking is still very important. It can solve most of our problem. But now in the information age, okay, people start to actually introduce a new concept called computational thinking. You know, computational thinking is very similar to math thinking. However, the computational thinking just basically emphasize the some kind of a sequence of instructions. Now, in order to solve the problem, okay, if you got a problem, okay, now let's design a process. Let's actually figure out what kind of things we need to do. Step one, step two, step three, and you can provide some kind of instruction to finish the step one, instructions to finish the step two, instructions to finish step three, and eventually you get the problem solved. Okay, that's called computational thinking. The computational thinking is basically to create a sequence of instructions to solve a problem. Okay, now this is what, because once you actually get the idea of computational thinking, then you can actually basically migrate this idea and put this idea into the computer system and let the computer system to solve the problem. Okay, so that's why computational thinking is so important now, so we can actually take advantage of computer technology. So once you got the process of doing the computational thinking, you can allow the computer system to do the job instead. Okay. So basically, a sequence of instruction is also called algorithm. So using the computational thinking, using this concept, we're going to create something called algorithm. So then we can use the algorithm, follow these instructions, follow these steps, you can solve the problem. And you can actually ask the computer to solve the problem and give the computer these sequence of instructions. So that's basically called computational thinking. Um, so once, if you actually, have the idea of computational thinking, then it will be very straightforward for you to, create a computer language and solve any of the problem. Okay. Now in Python, you already learned the Python syntax, so you can solve the problem using by writing the Python language. Now in Java, Java is another language. Okay. Now, one good thing about the compute languages is that if you actually learn, the first language is always the difficult language to learn. It doesn't matter which language, no matter which language you try to learn. If this is your first language, it's always the difficult part, because you need to actually think about things differently using some kind of computational thinking. But once you know learn the first language, and you know how to solve the problem using one language, now it's relatively easy to learn another language, the second language, or the third language. you know so if for most people, if you're already actually familiar with one language, two languages, you actually work very well with particular one languages, then it's probably a piece of cake just to learn one more language. Sometimes people are going to say, well, give me just 1 week or two, I can learn another new language. Now, because most of the languages have basically the same structure, the only difference between language and the languages are the syntaxes, the syntax, uh, or we can say a grammar. Okay. The syntaxes are different, but the concept is the same. Okay. Now, for Java language, okay, so if you compare the Java with Python, you will find out the Java and the Pythons are very different from a syntax perspective. But once you actually familiar with the syntax of Java, and then once we start to learn all these different structures, like control structures, loops, branches, and all the classes, you will find out there's technically no much difference between Java and Python, but the syntax is very different. So, but to learn the syntax, um, it takes maybe just a couple of weeks or so. So here's a sample code for the Java. Now, if you know Python, you will find out the Python language is very easy to start, and now the Java is a little bit tricky. So every actual Java language should actually follow certain kind of format. One example is, for if you start a Java language, you need to define a class. Okay. So in this case, you're going to say, okay, public class salary, and that's the class name. Okay, that's the keyword called a class. And the public basically means it is public. So that means everybody can actually start to execute this code. It's public. Because later on, when we learn the Java, you will find out there's some kind of class or method. It's called a private. The private basically means not everyone can access this class. Only people who are allowed to access the class, then you can access the class. But public means everyone can actually, it's open to everyone to actually start the class. Okay, so class is the one, you have to actually define and declare the class, and then before you can do anything else. And also, in order to run the Java code, you have to have a main method. Okay, you're probably going to see a couple of keywords. Public, again, it's a public. And the main method is always going to be public. Okay, I never see any actual private main method. Okay, and statical. So that means you basically always start from this main method, and you know statical is basically it's in contract with dynamic. But at this moment, you don't worry about a statical. It's just a syntax. Say you always put public, static, and void before the main method. Okay. Void basically means the main method does not require any return value. Okay. So that's the method name, and then the parentheses, and you're going to see the arguments inside the method. Okay. So Java always starts with the main method. It's the entry point. It's the entry point. So when you start a computer program, you always start from the entry point. Okay. Now, once you're actually in the main method, then you start to execute each of the statement or instruction. Okay. Now, for each of the statement or the definition of the variables, Java is also kind of different from Python. Okay. Now here's what this first statement means. So the wage is sometimes called a variable or identifier. This is the same as Java. So in Java, you can in Python you can define a variable called a wage, right? But in Python, in Java, we can also define a wage. Now, but before we can use this variable, we have to declare what is the type of this variable. And now here we use int. Basically means this is the wage is a variable declared as integer type. Okay, it's an integer type. Okay, before you can assign a value 20 into the wage. Now remember, you already know that in computer language, if you say wage equals 20, doesn't necessarily this equal it's not the same meaning as math in the math as in the math, because in the math when you say equal, that means the left side equals the right side. Now in computer language, that equal has more meaning. It's normally, what does this mean? What does equal basically mean?
It's the assignment operator. It makes wage 20.
Okay, it's assignment. So that means the wage is declared as a variable. Now variable in computer language, it basically means a kind of placeholder. So when you declare a wage as an integer, that means the computer gonna reserve a memory space. This memory space is called a wage. Now, everything I can store in this memory space gonna be of the type integer. So, so, so you're gonna actually the Java gonna interpret this as an integer. Typically, an integer basically for integer type, the Java gonna reserve 32 bits by 32 binary bits for the integer. So that means you're gonna reserve 32 bits. Each bit can store a binary number. It could be either 0 or 1. So that means you can store 11111 or the one that is 32 1. Okay. Or 101 1111 or 110111. So it's a combination for all these 32 bits binary numbers. Okay. So the wage can store, it's an integer type. It can store up to 32 bits. Now you can actually figure out if you for 32 bits, what's the biggest numbers you can store in there, right? It's a very big number, but not as big as you think. So once you declare a wage as an integer, then you can assign an integer value to the wage. That's assignment. So that means you basically, once you actually see this assignment, the Java are going to put the 20 in that memory location. Okay. So now this is the assignment. And then this is the actually print statement or display statement. Okay. Now in Python, so when you actually print something, you just say print, right? And then you're going to say parentheses. Okay. Okay. Now in Java, you have to put something more. It's called a system.out dot print, because normally system.out is actually a class that which actually is defined in the library. So then this print is a library method. So you can just call the library method in the system.out. Okay. This is another print statement. Okay. Now, if you try to write the similar program in Python, it's probably a little bit simpler. Okay, let me actually just do this. Let me erase that part. So if you write the same program using Python, then it's relatively simple. You don't need this declare a class. You don't need to put the main method. Basically, what you need to do is you're going to say, okay, here's the Python program. So you can type wage equals 20. And then you're going to print, okay, salary is, and then you can put another print. Oh, sorry, no double quotes, just the wage times 40 times 50. That's it, right? I think that's it. Just these three actually statements. So that Python gonna do the job. Now, what's the difference between Python and the Java? So first thing, when Python actually assign value to the variable, you can declare the variable and assign value to the variable. You don't have to declare the wage as an integer. Okay. But for Java, you have to do that. Okay. Now, also when you print, you can directly type print. That's different syntax. Okay, that's okay. So now what's the difference between this? Now in Python, when you actually declare a variable wage, you don't have to declare what type the wage is going to be. So whether it's an integer type or floating point or string or character or the different type of data, right? You don't have to do that. Now, until you have the first assignment, if you assign an integer value to wage, and then the Python going to say, oh, I know wage is integer type. But that's not always the case. Now, next, after actually you finish this statement, if you actually perform another assignment, you're going to assign wage equals 20.7, then the type of the wage actually changed to a floating point number. not an integer anymore. So that's why in Python, we normally call Python a dynamically typed language. It's a dynamic type language. So that means the type of the variable is not fixed. It's dynamic. So whenever you use the variable, when you assign the value to the variable, and then whatever the value you assign to the variable, that's the type of this variable. If you assign integer, then it's an integer type. If assigned a floating point, it's a floating point type. So that's why it's called a dynamically. It's a dynamically typed language. Okay. Now Java and most other language are basically called statically typed language. Okay. It's statically typed language. So that means before you assign a value to the variable, you have to declare the variable type. And once you declare the variable type as integer, you should assign an integer value to this variable. Because if the variable is declared as integer, you have to assign an integer value to that variable. Okay. Now what happens if I say I declare wage as integer, but I assign a floating point number to the wage? What about this? Let's say if I say wage equals 20.8 semicolon. What do you think? That's called actual type mismatch. On the left side of the wage, it's integer type. On the right side, it's a floating point. It's not an integer, right? Okay, that's called a mismatch. Now, mismatch could be deadly. Okay. Sometimes if you have a mismatch, the Java compiler gonna point out, say, the type mismatch. It doesn't work. And it just print out error message. Okay. However, in certain case, the Java compiler will not point out. Sometimes it's gonna give you a warning. Okay. Not give you error message. For example, in this particular case, if you assign 20.8 to wage, it may still work. But however, it may not work as you wish it gonna work. Okay. It may not do the job as you wish it would do. So what happens? Can you give me a wild guess in this case? Let's think about it.
I'm guessing this would work in this scenario.
Okay. It's gonna work, right?
I think so.
Okay. Yeah. It's gonna work, but not the way you wanted it to work. Why? Because you assign a floating point type to wage, because wage is declared as integer, right? So when you assign the a floating point number to the wage, because the way in Java, the number stored in the integer type has to be an integer. So in that case, the Java gonna automatically store the integer part to the wage, and it can actually get rid of the fractional part. So the 0.8, the fractional part, will be discarded. Okay, so it's working. So when you actually try to print the wage, guess what? Your wage has been cut. It's not $20.80. It's not 20.8. It's going to be 20, because you try to assign a floating point to the wage integer, and then you're going to only store the integer part and get rid of the fractional part. So yeah, it's working, but you should realize it's probably not going to work in the way you want it to work. That's the case. Okay, so you're going to lose some information if you actually have some kind of type mismatch. Now, on the other hand, if you declare something like a type as a floating point, or like a double in Java, you can declare as double, which is a floating point, and then you assign integer to it. In that part, it's probably okay because, so let me actually show you something. So if you say, okay, double x, okay, x is a double type, which is actually a floating point. And the next statement are going to be x equals 20. Now, if you declare double type, technically you should actually assign a floating point number to x. So you can say 20.23. That's perfectly well. But however, what about if you say, well, what about if I assign an integer type to it? Okay, let me say double x, so x equals 20. What happens if I say print what will be printed out? It will print it out as 20.0. Okay, so it will be printed as, so you're probably going to say, well, what's the difference? 20 is 20.0. It's the same number. But yeah, from math perspective, it's the same number. From computer science perspective, from Java perspective, it's not the same because this is a floating point. Okay, this is an integer. Okay, so that's the difference. Okay. So so if you look at this, then you know the next one I want to talk about is, this is another import type. Now here, you use the assignment, right? Assignment is one way to import a value. Okay. Remember, the computer actually language, it consists of 3 different parts: import, process, output, right? Now here, there's an import, this is output. There's no much process because actually the process is actually in here. You actually do the computing job. Once you actually define, assign 20 to the wage, and then you multiply wage with 40, and then multiply 50. So this basically what this program is supposed to do. So this program actually gave you like a wage is actually, it's like your hourly rate. Okay, so if you do the job and then you're gonna pay $20 per hour, that's hourly rate. Now, so now when you say wage times 40, that's give you the weekly rate, right? Because assume you're gonna work 40 hours per week. So 40 hours per week. So so that's why $20 per hour, 40 hours a week. So 20 times 40, that's 800. So your weekly rate is 800. Okay. Now, so that's weekly rate. Now, then you multiply 50, that gave you annual rate. I think for a year, you're probably going to think about 52 weeks. But in terms of the annual pay, most company going to count 50 weeks per year. So that's why it times 50. Okay. So the hourly rate times 40, that's weekly rate, times 50, that's annual rate. Okay. So that's the process. And then that's the output. So the process is actually embedded inside the output. And that's one way to import the value. And in Java, a more actually widely used actually way of importing the data is to use some kind of method called a scanner. Scanner is a defined class in Java. And when you actually try to use a scanner to import the value, now typically you're going to create, the way you're going to do this is you're going to create a scanner object. That's a scanner object. Okay, so you declare wage as integer type, and you create a scanner object. So the scanner object gonna basically scan the computer and to see whether you actually type the import from your keyboard. Okay, so basically when Python, when you try, not Python, when you try to run this Java program, so it will basically generate a prompt. Okay, something like this, a prompt. So you're gonna actually, the cursor gonna wait here, and then you can type your value. Okay, and once you type the value, like if you type 20, hit the enter, then the scanner gonna actually scan this value using the method scan object and scan the value using the method. One of the method is called next int. So then next int, the method is gonna scan the value and then assign this value to the wage. Now, if you actually type 20, the next int is gonna actually scan this value 20 and assign to the wage. Okay, so now the value for the wage is 20. Okay, so then you can actually continue to do the job just like the previous case. Okay.
Professor, I have a quick question.
Yes.
What if the user puts in something that's not an integer? Will next int ignore it, or will it return an error?
This is the same as this is basically the same as this kind of scenario. So if you have a type mismatch, so saying you basically use the next int, right? And but in the actual import, you just type other type, right? Then there's a type mismatch. Many times the Java, if they can do the job, they can actually convert the type to whatever type is supposed to actually import. So if you put 20.5, I believe the actual value, the wage you're going to get is 20. Okay, but in some case, if these two types are so different, then the Java going to give you error message. For example, if you say 20 and you actually, you just type John, it's not even a number, right? Now that's going to be a problem. So then it actually is not going to work. But if it's a number, sometimes Java the language the Java compiler not a compiler, but Java runtime actually, gonna think, oh, it's still a number, but not the type I want it to be. So I just do the conversion. I just convert the number from to the numbers you actually you want it to be. So they're gonna do the conversion. That's why I don't recommend you to do this. Sometimes people just try to intentionally do the actual type of mismatch, but type of mismatch has certain risk because even it's working, it gave you the wrong answers many times. So that's why. But if the type is too different, like you talk about a string, you talk about characters, and then you try to convert it into a integer, then there's a problem. So it's not going to work. Okay. So always try, if you say next int, always put the integer type. Now, if you want to put a floating type, then there's another method. Okay, so you can choose. The scanner has many different methods. Now, if you want to actually import a string, you can simply just put a next parenthesis. You don't have to mention int or next float or whatever, next double. So you don't have to do that. But you just need to realize. So that's why Java is sometimes called a statically typed language. Now, statically typed language has an advantage, but the advantage is that it's clearly defined type. So if you have a type, if you match the type, it will work perfectly. If you have a mismatch, it may have a problem. Now, Python is flexible. When you use it, you don't have to define the type. But the problem is people easily get lost because, when you run the program like 100 lines of code, and now during the execution of the code, you always change the type of a variable. Now people get confused later because what is type of this variable? What is the value now? So there's advantage, disadvantage. So most of the language, they are all statically, typed. So like this Java language. Okay. So let's actually switch to the Zybook. I want to actually practice some of these code. So let me actually just stop presenting the current screen now. And then I'm going to present the other one. Okay. So now I switch to the Zybook. So one good thing about the Zybook is the Zybook provide a kind of online-based the compiling service. Okay. As I mentioned that this actually the online compiling service actually works well and serve the purpose for this course. But when you really actually, when you seriously try to create a big Java program, if you have like a couple of hundred lines of code, or you're gonna actually combine the code from different files, different actually doc files, then it's gonna have a problem, and not just the slow, the performance issue. It may have a problem. So that's why for a simple piece of code, it's always good to use Zybook. Okay. So this is the first code we just mentioned in the PowerPoint. So if I run this code, you're gonna do the compiling, and also after finish the compile, it just run the code. So you will find out, you're gonna print out the salary is, and here. Now, so then the second print statement gonna actually print out the computed value. The wage is 20, so 20 times 40 times 50, that's 40,000. Okay. Now, so there are a couple of things I want to mention. So in the print statement, the print statement is going to print either the string or a number. So if you print a string, you just need to make sure that the space in the string is very important. If you actually, here's the one space here, Java going to treat the space as a character as well. So if you actually eliminate the space, now if you run it again, just watch, because that space is going to disappear. Okay. Yeah, that space is going to disappear. So please be careful about this. And also, there's a difference between print and print ln. Print ln basically stand for line, line. So the difference is the print gonna do the printing job. So you're gonna print this string, and once you actually finish the printing, the cursor stops at the end of this string. That's the where the cursor gonna be. So if you actually have a next print, the printer gonna start from this cursor. So that's why you have a print salary is, so then the cursor stays over here right after is. Okay. Now if you have a print ln, that means it's gonna do the printing job, and then it's gonna actually switch to the next line, the beginning of the next line. So you're gonna print and then jump to the next line. But if you have a print without ln, then the cursor is gonna stay where it is. Okay, so that's a difference. So let's say if I change this to print ln, sorry, low case. Okay. And then you will see these gonna be printed on different lines. Okay. You're gonna be salary is, and there's a space here, but you don't notice it because that's the end of it. And then this value going to be printed in the next line. So print ln basically going to print this statement and then jump to the next line. So waiting for the next print statement. Okay, so that's the difference. Now, if you use the scanner, now the scanner is kind of a little bit tricky, because if you use a traditional compiler, so you use the scanner and then you compile the code, and then when you run the code, you're gonna pop up a kind of a prompt, so you can type. But in here with web-based, like in Zybook, so there's no actual place for you to enter the value, type the value. So that's why using the scanner, Zybook basically use a slightly different, interface. They put actually a text box. So when you use a scanner, so when you define a scanner object, so you basically, just call scanner dot next int. So basically, you can actually read the data in the text box over here, read the data over here, and assign this data to the dog years. Okay, now this is another example. Let's take a look at this example to see how the scanner actually works. The scanner is actually very popular actually import method, because when you use the assignments, so you basically put this import inside the Java code. So every time when you change the import value, say wage equals 20, but your wage has been changed, someone else wage has been changed, it's a 25, 30, then you have to actually change the statement. So here you have to change the statement and recompile the code. Okay. Now, if you use a scanner, so then you don't have to recompile the code, because all you need to do is run the program again, because you're going to actually type the value in the prompt. So you can actually type a different value. So you only compile the code once, and then it's going to work for different import value. So that's the advantage. So why people use the scanner. So now, because scanner is defined in Java library, so you need to actually first actually use the keyword called import. The import basically going to say, well, I'm going to import a scanner class from the Java library. Okay, so this is a syntax. So it's a Java dot util utility basically dot scanner. Don't forget the semicolon at the end of each Java statement. Okay, semicolon is very important, because if you actually familiar with the Python, you're probably going to ignore the semicolon. Python never care about this. Python actually, it's the basically care about the format. You can do the indentations, you can do all this, but Java doesn't care about this. So again, if you actually type the Java language, you need to create a class, main method. Now this is always the case. Okay. When you create the Java program, always put these 2 lines here. Now, the class name could be different. It should be descriptive. Whatever the class you want to create, use the name. Okay. Now, this program, if you read this program is it's also a very simple program. It just basically try to make a conversion between dog years and human years. This is always I don't know whether this is true or not, but I think it probably is true, because when people say 1 human year, 1 dog year equals 7 human years. Now, what does that mean? Okay. When a dog lived for 3 years, it is basically equivalent to 31 human years. Okay. What does that mean? Because if for a human being, if this baby is a 3 years old, he or she is still a baby, right? Now for dog, it's different. If a dog lived for 3 human years, like if this dog was born in 2018, now it's 2021, so it's actually 3 years. Now we're gonna say this dog is already an adult, because 3 years, 3 dog years is equivalent to 21 human years. That means that dog is equivalent to 21 years old human being. So that dog is mature enough. It's adult. If the dog commit any criminals, then he gonna be tried as adult. Okay. So that's basically this program is supposed to do. So you can actually use the scanner. You declare a SCNR as a scanner object. So that's the syntax to declare any object. So this scanner is defined as a class. So, and it's going to scan from the system.in. So basically in Java, system.in means import. System.out means output. Okay. So then you declare dog years as integer type, human years as integer type. So you basically, the Java going to reserve 2 actually memory space. 1 for dog years, it's an integer. 1 is a human years for another integer. So you're going to reserve 2 memory space. So then you're going to actually call the scanner, call the next int, the method defined in the scanner object. So then you can actually, the Java going to look for the prompt, which is over here. Look for the prompt. which is the in you know inbox, the text box. Okay, so if I put the 7, that means it's a 7. Okay, so so when you run this program, the scanner can actually scan this system in and find out, oh, 7 is here. So then the 7 going to be assigned to the dog year. So the dog year gets the value 7. So then the human year is going to be equals to 7 times the dog year, which is 7. So it's a 7 times 7, it's a 49. And then you're going to print out these statements. The first one you're going to print out is a string A. Remember, it's a print. So once you print the A, the cursor stays at the end of the A. So then when you print the dog year, which is 7, 7 going to be right after the A, after the space. Okay. And then years old dog is about the same age as whatever. So that string going to be after the 7. Okay. Let's run this. So it says A. This is the first print statement. And dog year, which is 7. And then this long statement. Year-old dog is about the same age as then human year. Human year is 7 times 7, which is 49 years old. Now, just don't get me wrong for this, because even though this printed as 2 lines, but it's actually in 1 line. The reason for this is because we run out of space at the end. Okay, so it never actually switch a line, so it's all in the same line. So if this one gets longer, then this 49 years old should be in the same line. It's just 1 line. Okay. Now, if you actually change the import to 4 and then run it, it's going to be a 4-year-old dog is about the same age as 28 years old human. So that's what this program is supposed to do. Okay. So any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is that how the lines always work? Like, how would you actually if you wanted it per se to print on separate lines, how would you make that happen?
You mean, so like A and the dog, you're going to be separate line, right? Separate
Yeah,
line.
yep.
Then you can do this. That's one way of doing this. Print the line, then, because that means after you print A, then you're going to switch to the next line.
Gotcha.
Okay. And also, because that's the simple way of doing it, there's a various different way to do so, because in computer language, then you're going to actually use a certain kind of something called escape key. So you can use actually like a backward /n, then you can actually change the line. There's a various different way to format the printer out, but that's just one way. So we're going to talk about this later on in the output. There's a lot of different output format so you can actually use. Okay, this is just one way. And also you can actually type everything in just you, instead of actually 5 different printer statement, you can actually put everything in one printer statement. For example, if you say, okay, I can combine the first and the second printer in one printer statement, you can do this. Okay, you can use plus. Now, in this case, plus is not addition. It doesn't make any sense because this is a string, right? And this is actually a number, but you're going to convert it into a string. So this is called concatenate. So you're going to actually bind these 2 strings together, and it's still going to work. Okay. So in this case, you're going to see A 4 dog year. That's 4. So it's actually, and then this one, because I put the print ln, so the next print statement is going to start from here. Now, why there's a one space over here? It's why the year does not start from the beginning?
Because you have a space right next to your
Because there's a space over
in
here.
the actual syntax.
Yeah, because if you put more space, you will see the difference. It's kind of slow. That's a problem. Yeah, you can see more space here. Yeah. And then you can actually also put this one in one line now, but you don't want to actually put the too long for each line because yeah, and then you can yeah. Yeah, so you can always do that. So okay, so this is actually how we're going to use the a basic import, method. You can use assignment, you can use scanner, and then that's the process part. So you can always see 3 different instruction parts: the import, the output, and in the middle part, that's the processes. That basically the process. Typically, the process is going to be the biggest part, because in this particular program, because it's very simple conversion between human years and the dog years. It's just you just only have one line, right, to do the process. Then this is also part of the import. So it's a so but you always have 3 parts. So it's typical. Okay, now let's actually switch back to the PowerPoint. So let me stop here and start again. Okay. So the next thing we want to talk about is the Java comments and the white space. A comment is a text program. Okay, a comment is a text a programmer added to the code. Now, the comment basically does not have any impact to your Java code. You can add a comment anywhere in the Java code, but does not impact the result of the Java Java code. The only reason we put the comment is to allow the programmer, to allow the human being to read the code, actually to understand the code. The comment itself, when a compiler, when a Java compiler see the comment, the compiler gonna skip the comment, as if it does not exist. So there are 2 different comments. One comment is the single line comments. They use the double forward slash, and that's a single comment. And the other one, if you actually have a very big comment, for example, if you define a Java method and you want to describe what this method is supposed to do, and then you're gonna write a very long description for this actually method, then you're going to use a multi-line comments. Okay, so here's what are you going to do. Let me see here. Where's my cursor? Okay, so for example, I can, for one line comment, I can put a comment over here, say That's hourly rate. Okay, so then the Java actually from Java compiler is still going to treat this line as just this. So because the Java see the double forward slash, you're going to ignore the rest of the part. Okay, if you have a multi-line comment, then you can put the forward slash asterisk, say this program will do whatever, blah, 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 blah. And then blah, blah, blah. You're going to continue the thing. And then you can put the some kind of, okay, asterisk, then forward slash. Then everything between this and this, the Java compiler going to treat as a comment, and they're going to skip it. Okay. So the only reason why people use the comment is allow the people to read this program. Okay, very easily. Now, if you work in a company, many company actually, they have some kind of rule for the coding. Okay, they have a convention or they have a rule for the coding. So for example, in most of the case, when you write the program, you probably actually write a long lines of code, and you can remember over which variable is used for what purpose. So you define all these different variable, you define all these methods, and you know exactly what you're doing, but other people may not be able to see it. So they need to read your code completely to understand why you want to define this, why you want to create this method. Okay, so this is very inconvenient. So the best way to help people to understand your code is always put the comments when you define a new method, and then you put the description at the beginning of the comments, the beginning of the method. So that's the best way to that's a very good practice. Okay, and I think in many companies, when you write the code, putting a comment is kind of mandatory. It's a requirement, because when they review the code, they want to ask you to say, well, you missed the comments here. You need to actually tell people why you want to create this method. Because in corporation, in most actually IT company, when you create the code, you are not just the only owner of the code. You're going to submit the code into the database, and other people can see your code, and the other people can modify your code. So you're going to multiple people going to work on the same code. So when you add anything, you need to add a comment. Sometimes people actually ask other people, say, if you add this new comment, you need to put your name, put the date of the updated time, so then other people can see, oh, John just modified this piece of code on December 22nd or whatever. So the comments is so important. So most of the time you have 100 lines of code, and half of the code is just a comment. The actual code is only another half. Okay, so I think that's pretty much all I want to talk about. So please actually start to work on the assignments I just put on the Zybooks. Okay, so please work on the assignment for the first couple of sections. Okay, and so that's pretty much all I want to talk about for today. Do you have any questions, any issues?
I have a quick question, Professor.
Yeah.
On the syllabus, it lists Lab 1 was going to be assigned Monday. Has that been assigned yet, or am I missing something?
I haven't assigned the lab yet.
Okay.
I need to figure out which lab I'm going to give assigned to you. So, but yeah, so lab also going to be on the Zybook, but I haven't put the assignment as an assignment yet. So, please actually, after you finish each of the sections and do the actually activity problems, and then like one participation activity and the challenge activity. The lab is typically at the end of each chapter. So yeah, I will assign you the lab separately.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so enjoy the rest of the day. It's cold, but it's shiny outside. Well, have a good weekend.
You too, Professor. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Have a good weekend.
Have a good one.
Good,
Bye,
Professor.
Bye.
Thank you.